The dog wouldn't move. That was the thing nobody could explain afterward. Not the transit officer, not the commuters who slowed to stare, not Grace herself, standing in the middle of the downtown bus station with a leash gone slack in her hand. Atlas had pulled free so quietly she almost hadn't noticed. 1 second, he was beside her. The next, he was across the concourse, pressed against the underside of a bench near Gate 7, his broad, brindle body curved around something small. A boy, maybe 8 years old, sitting completely still in a jacket 2 sizes too big, a backpack with a broken strap clutched against his chest. Atlas wasn't growling. He wasn't barking. He was simply there, a wall of warm fur between the child and the rest of the world. "Ma'am." The transit officer's voice cut through the noise of the station. He was already moving toward them, hand raised. "Quote 1, quote 2, Grace said, stepping forward, her voice catching. "Quote 3. Atlas didn't come. He leaned harder into the boy's side. The officer stopped 2 feet away. "Quote 4, quote 5. Grace crouched, reaching for the leash. "Quote 6. And then Atlas did something no one in that station expected. He turned his head, slowly, deliberately. He took the hem of the boy's army green jacket gently between his teeth, not pulling, not tugging, just holding. The way you might tap someone on the shoulder, the way you might say, "Wait, look closer." Everything stopped. The officer's hand dropped to his side. Grace's fingers froze around the leash clip. A woman with rolling luggage walked past, glanced down, and kept walking, but then stopped 3 steps later, turned back. The boy looked up for the first time. His eyes were dark and careful, the eyes of someone who had learned to calculate before he moved. He looked at the officer. He looked at Grace. Then he looked at Atlas, as if checking something. Grace's gaze dropped to the jacket collar, turned outward by Atlas's grip. There was writing on the inside. Permanent marker, neat and deliberate, the letters slightly faded, but still clear. She read it once, then again. The officer leaned in. His jaw went still. Grace's chest tightened in a way she didn't have words for. She looked at the boy, at his careful, exhausted face, at the zip tie threaded through his left sneaker where a shoelace should have been, and she understood that whatever was written on that collar was the reason this child was still alive. "Hey," she said softly, her voice dropping to almost nothing. "It's okay. We're not going to make you go anywhere." The boy looked at Atlas one more time. The dog's tail moved, once, slow. The boy exhaled. But that's not where this story begins. Before we get back to it, hit that like button and subscribe if you're new here. Tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? I love seeing how far these stories travel. The radiator clicked at 5:04 a.m. It always did. The fun is just beginning. Tell us what city you're from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. The tension is rising. Who's watching from where? Like and subscribe to the channel, more to come. Tell us in the comments who's from which country, and give us a like and subscribe. The plot thickens. Let's check our geography. Tell us where you are now. Give the video a thumbs up and subscribe. We're just warming up. Tell us where you're watching from. Give the video a like and hit the subscribe button. The climax is near. Share where you're from, like, and be sure to subscribe. Events are unfolding rapidly. Write your city in the chat, give it a like, and subscribe so you don't get lost. The juiciest part is yet to come. Let's get started. Get to know each other. Where are you from? Like and subscribe right now. The suspense is building. Tell us where you're watching this episode from, and reward us with a like and a subscribe. The excitement is running high. Tell us what city you're from now. Give us a big like and subscribe to the channel. Grace Washington had stopped setting an alarm 6 months ago. The radiator was more reliable anyway. 3 clicks, a hiss, then silence, like it was clearing its throat before the day began. She lay still for a moment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling she kept meaning to report to the landlord, then pushed herself upright. The apartment was small in the way that stops feeling small once you stop fighting it. 1 bedroom, 3rd floor, curtains she'd found at a second-hand shop on Meredith Street. Pale yellow, slightly too short for the windows. 2 succulents on the sill that she kept forgetting to water. They were surviving anyway. She respected that about them. She made instant coffee in the chipped blue mug her mother had sent from Atlanta 3 Christmases ago. Drank it standing at the counter. Half a piece of toast with peanut butter, eaten over the sink. She was out the door by 6. The bus smelled like diesel and someone's leftover fast food. Something fried, something sweet, something that had been warm an hour ago. Grace stood near the back, her worn gray hoodie zipped to the collar, the shelter logo on the chest so faded it looked like a watermark. She had a small snag in her black leggings near the left knee. She'd been meaning to throw them out for 2 months. Maplewood Animal Shelter sat at the end of a quiet industrial block, sandwiched between a tile warehouse and a dry cleaner that was never open. The smell hit her before the door did. Antiseptic, dog fur, and underneath it all, something warmer. Old blankets, worn towels, the particular smell of animals that have been frightened and are slowly learning not to be. "You're early." Deb, the shelter coordinator, looked up from behind the intake desk. She had reading glasses pushed up into her gray hair and a clipboard she never seemed to put down. "I'm always early," Grace said. "The Hendersons called. They can't take the new foster." Grace set her bag down on the bench by the door. "Which one?" "Atlas." Deb said it the way you say a name when you're not sure the other person is going to like what comes next. __quote_14__. Grace had seen Atlas twice through the kennel window. Big dog. Brindle coat. One ear slightly torn at the tip. He didn't pace like the others. He just sat near the back of his kennel and watched, with brown eyes that seemed to be forming opinions about everything they landed on. "He's a lot," Deb added. "You said that about the Beagle mix." The Beagle mix chewed through a radiator hose, and she got adopted. Grace picked up her bag. "I'll take him." Deb opened her mouth, closed it, wrote something on the clipboard. Grace walked down the corridor toward the kennels, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. She could already hear Atlas, not barking, not whining, just the quiet shift of paws on concrete, waiting. She told herself it was just a short-term arrangement, temporary, a few weeks at most. She almost believed it. Atlas came home with her on a Thursday. He fit in the back seat of Deb's borrowed hatchback like he'd been folded there, legs tucked, head up, watching the city move past the window with that same quiet attention he gave everything. He didn't whine. He didn't pace. He just watched, and Grace kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, trying to read something in his expression that she couldn't quite name. "Quote 20, she told him. He looked at her in the mirror. She wasn't sure which of them she was talking to. The first few days were ordinary. Atlas ate his food slowly, like he was thinking about each bite. He slept near the apartment door, not blocking it, just close, the way someone sleeps when they want to know if anything changes in the night. Grace gave him space. He gave her the same. On Sunday, she brought him to the shelter's weekly intake review. Deb was at the front desk, reading glasses on, a stack of folders beside her coffee cup. Deb asked without looking up. Grace said. Deb set down her pen. She said it carefully, the way people say things they're not sure they should say at all. A child, 8 years old, Bounced through 3 placements in 14 months. Grace waited. The last placement flagged some concerns. Deb picked up her pen again, clicked it once. The family passed all the standard checks. On paper, everything looked fine. But Deb looked up then. The boy stopped talking, stopped eating at the table, started sleeping with his shoes on. The fluorescent light buzzed faintly above them. Somewhere in the back corridor, a dog shifted in its kennel, nails ticking against concrete. "What happened to him?" Grace asked. "That's what they're trying to figure out." Deb closed the folder. "I'm only telling you because the placement coordinator is a friend of mine. She said the boy disappeared from the placement address 4 days ago. They filed a report. They're looking." Grace's hand rested on Atlas's back. She felt him breathe, slow even. "A child is missing," she said. "They don't use that word yet. Technically, he left on his own." Deb's voice was flat, not cold, the flatness of someone who has learned to hold difficult things without dropping them. ___, quote _ 36 ___. Grace looked down at Atlas. He was looking at the door. She told herself this had nothing to do with her. She was a shelter volunteer. She fostered dogs. She took the bus and drank instant coffee and forgot to water her succulents. This was someone else's problem, in someone else's system. She picked up Atlas's leash from the bench. "I'm going to take him out for a walk," she said. "He hasn't had a long one today." Deb nodded, went back to her folders. Grace clipped the leash to Atlas's collar. He stood immediately, already facing the door, already ready, as if he had been waiting for exactly this moment. Eli had been at the bus station for 4 days. He hadn't planned it that way. He had planned 3 hours, long enough to figure out how to get to his grandmother's city without anyone stopping him. But 3 hours became a night, and one night became 4, and now he knew which janitor mopped the same corner twice, which kiosk worker took her break at 2 p.m., and which benches had the least foot traffic after midnight. He was 8 years old. He had learned to be very good at not being seen. His backpack held 3 things: a library book he hadn't returned, a folded piece of paper with his grandmother's address on it, and an empty granola bar wrapper he kept forgetting to throw away. He had $1.47 in his pocket, a dollar bill and 2 quarters and 3 pennies, which he'd found on the floor near the ticket machines. His left shoelace had snapped on day 2. He'd replaced it with a zip tie he found near the maintenance door. It held. The jacket was his grandmother Nora's idea. She'd given it to him 8 months ago, before the placement, when everything was still uncertain, and Nora was still fighting paperwork she didn't fully understand. It was too big, army green, the kind with deep pockets, and she'd written her name and phone number on the inside of the collar in permanent marker, pressing hard so it would last. ___, quote _ 39 ___. She'd told him, smoothing the collar down with both hands. "Just in case you ever need to find your way home, baby." He hadn't understood what she meant then. He understood now. The house he'd left had looked fine from the outside. Clean windows, a welcome mat, a bowl of fruit on the counter that nobody ever touched. But the air inside felt wrong in a way Eli couldn't explain to anyone. A tightness, like the house itself was holding its breath. He had started sleeping facing the door within the first week. He had stopped eating at the table by the second. He didn't tell anyone because he didn't think anyone would believe him. Everything looked fine. That was the problem with things that looked fine. So he left. Quietly, on a Tuesday morning, while the house was still deciding whether to wake up. He wasn't running away. He was running to. At the station, he'd found a bench near Gate 7, where the overhead light flickered just enough that people avoided looking directly at it. He sat beneath it and watched the main entrance the way he'd learned to watch doors. Not with fear, exactly. With readiness. On the third night, the dog had appeared. Eli hadn't called it over. He hadn't made any sound at all. But the dog had crossed the concourse, big, brindle, moving with quiet certainty, and simply lain down beside him. No reason, no command, just a warm weight against his side in the cold dark of the station. Eli had put his hand on the dog's back. The dog had stayed. For the first time in 4 days, Eli had closed his eyes and slept without facing the door. The walk Grace had planned was 20 minutes. A loop around the block, maybe down to the park on Clement Street, then back to the shelter to finish the afternoon intake forms. Atlas had other ideas. He didn't pull hard. He never did. He simply leaned, a steady, persistent pressure on the leash, angling them away from the park, toward the underpass, toward the low concrete sprawl of the downtown transit center 3 blocks east. Grace corrected him twice. He returned to the same direction both times, patient and certain, his nose low, reading something in the air she couldn't access. She told herself she was letting him lead because he needed the stimulation. New environment, new smells, good for a dog still adjusting to foster life. She told herself it had nothing to do with what Deb had said that morning. She almost believed it. The bus station opened up around them as they descended the ramp to the lower concourse, exhaust and burnt coffee from the kiosk near the entrance, pigeons shifting on the rafters above Gate 6, a janitor pushing a mop across the same patch of floor he'd cleaned 20 minutes ago. The overhead light near Gate 7 flickered in its usual uneven rhythm. Travelers moved through the space with the particular forward lean of people who are somewhere between places and don't want to be stopped. Atlas slowed. His head came up. His ears shifted. The good one forward, the torn one slightly angled. He was reading something. Grace felt the leash go taut, then ease, then taut again. She kept her voice low. He wasn't pulling, he was pointing. She followed his gaze toward the far end of the concourse, past the row of plastic seats bolted to the wall, past the vending machine with the cracked front panel. Beneath the bench near Gate 7, mostly in shadow, sat a child, very still. The kind of still that isn't peaceful. It's practiced. Grace stopped walking. The boy was wearing an oversized army green jacket, jeans with a fraying hem, a backpack propped against the bench leg, its broken strap held with electrical tape. He was watching the main entrance. Not the way a child watches something interesting, the way someone watches a door they might need to move through quickly. She noticed the zip tie threaded through his left sneaker. She noticed the granola bar wrapper peeking from his jacket pocket. She noticed he hadn't looked at them yet, which meant he'd already clocked them and decided they weren't a threat. That kind of calculation in an 8-year-old stopped her breath for a moment. Atlas sat down. Just sat, without being told, without any command, right at the edge of the bench's shadow, close enough that the boy would feel his warmth, not crowding, not retreating. Present. The boy's eyes moved to the dog. Something shifted in his face. Not surprise. Recognition. Grace's chest tightened. She had seen that look before, on animals coming out of their kennels for the first time. The look of something that has been alone long enough to forget that company is possible. She crouched down slowly, so she wasn't standing over either of them. Quote 43, she said quietly. Quote 44. The boy looked at Atlas first, not at Grace, not at the leash, or her hoodie, or her face, at the dog. He held the dog's gaze for a long moment, as if conducting some private negotiation, and then something in his shoulders dropped. Barely, just a fraction. And he looked at her. Eli, he said. Grace kept her voice even. That's a good name. I'm Grace. She didn't reach out her hand. She stayed low, elbows on her knees, the cold concrete of the concourse floor close beneath her sneakers. Quote, 47. Eli looked back at the dog. Quote, 48. Grace felt something shift in her chest. She kept her face still. Quote, 49. Quote, Eli pointed at the bench above him. Quote, 50. Quote. The kiosk coffee smell drifted past them. Somewhere above, a pigeon adjusted its footing on the rafter, wings rustling briefly against the silence. Grace asked. A pause. He was calculating how much to give. He didn't answer immediately. That was its own answer. Grace reached into her bag. She had a turkey sandwich from the deli on Morrow Street. She'd bought it at noon and forgotten to eat it. She held it out without making it a production. Just held it out. Eli looked at it. Then he took it with both hands, the way someone takes something they're afraid might disappear, and held it in his lap without unwrapping it. You don't have to eat it right now, Grace said. I know, he said. And then, quietly, he unwrapped it and took a bite. Grace watched him eat and made herself stay very still, the way she'd learned to stay still with animals that weren't sure yet whether the world was safe. Is there someone I can call? She asked. A parent or… My grandmother. He said it fast, like he'd been waiting for the right question. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore, 59, underscore, underscore. He reached into his sneaker, the one with the zip tie, and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft at the creases from being opened and closed many times. He held it out to Grace. Quote, 60. Quote. Grace took the paper carefully. The address was in another city, 4 hours by bus. Quote, 61, quote, she asked, quote, 62. Quote, he said it without embarrassment, like it was simply a problem he hadn't solved yet. Grace looked at him, at the electrical tape backpack, the fraying jeans, the jacket 2 sizes too big that swallowed his small frame, and felt a quiet, specific kind of anger settle somewhere behind her ribs. Not hot. Cold. The kind that stays. I didn't want to ask a person for help, Eli said. He was looking at Atlas, not at her. People walk away. He paused. But I thought, maybe a dog would stay. Atlas's tail moved once against the concrete floor. Grace pressed her lips together. She looked down at the folded address in her hand. She pulled out her phone. Before Grace could dial, the boots arrived. Heavy soles on tile. A deliberate, practiced sound. Transit Officer Marcus Webb was 41 years old, 14 years on the job, and he had a particular walk that said he'd seen most things twice and wasn't impressed by any of them. He stopped 6 feet away, thumbs hooked in his vest, and looked at the dog, the woman, and the child in that order. Quote, 66. His voice was level. Quote, 67. Grace stood up slowly. Quote, 68. Quote, 69. Marcus looked at Eli. Quote, 70. Eli looked at Atlas, then at Grace, a flicker of something, not fear exactly, calculation. Quote, 71, Grace said. Marcus's jaw shifted. I'm going to need to see some ID, ma'am, and I need to know if this child has a guardian present. I'm working on that right now. Working on it. He repeated it flatly. How long has he been sitting here? Grace opened her mouth, closed it. A while, Eli said. Marcus looked at him, really looked, the way he sometimes forgot to do after 14 years. The zip-tie shoelace, the electrical tape strap, the sandwich wrapper on the bench beside him, the sandwich half-eaten but held carefully, like something worth finishing. Something moved across Marcus's face and was gone. Quote, 77, quote, he asked Eli. Quote, 78, quote, 79, quote, a pause. Quote, 80, quote, Marcus unclipped the radio from his shoulder. Quote, 81. Quote, 82. Quote, Grace said. She held up the folded address paper. Quote, at 3. Marcus looked at the paper. He didn't take it. How old are you? He asked Eli. 8. Where do you live? Eli was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm trying to figure that out. The fluorescent light above gate 7 flickered. Once. Twice. Marcus put his radio back on his shoulder without keying it. He pulled over the plastic chair from the adjacent gate and sat down. Not looming, not official. Just sat, elbows on his knees, the same level as the boy. Eli. His voice was different now, quieter. Did someone hurt you? Eli didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He just said, very carefully, the house felt wrong. Marcus held that. Didn't push it. __, quote _91, __, he said. Grace's phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at the screen. Deb, calling back. She stepped 2 feet away and answered. Grace. Deb's voice was tight. Quote 93. Grace turned so her back was to Eli. She kept her voice low. Quote 94. Silence on the line. Quote 95, Grace said. Another silence. Longer. Quote 96, Deb said quietly. Quote 97. Grace hung up. She turned back. Marcus was still sitting in the plastic chair, and Eli was looking at Atlas, one hand resting on the dog's back. Atlas hadn't moved an inch. Marcus made his call. Grace made hers. For a few minutes, the three of them existed in a strange, suspended quiet. Eli finishing the sandwich, Atlas pressed against his side, the station moving around them like water around 3 stones. Grace walked to the edge of the concourse, far enough for privacy, close enough to keep Eli in her sight. She called Deb back. Quote 98, quote, Deb said. Quote 99, quote 100, quote, Grace asked. A pause. Quote 101. Quote 100. Quote 100. Deb's voice dropped. A family advocate. She's good. She'll want to speak with Eli directly, with his consent. And Grace, she'll also want to know about the grandmother. Grace looked across the concourse at Eli. He had finished eating. He was looking at Atlas with an expression she couldn't fully read. Something between relief and grief. The face of someone who has been carrying something heavy for so long, they've forgotten what it feels like to put it down. His grandmother has been trying to get custody, Grace said. He told me. For how long? He didn't say, but he has her address memorized. He wrote it down and kept it in his shoe. She paused. Deb, he planned this. He's 8 years old, and he planned this. The line was quiet for a moment. Call the grandmother, Deb said, before anyone else does. Grace hung up. She stood with the phone in her hand, the cracked screen catching the flicker from Gate 7's overhead light. She looked at the folded address paper. Then she looked at Marcus, who was still sitting with Eli, saying something low and unhurried, his big hands loose between his knees. She walked back over. Quote 112, she said to Marcus. He stood without argument and moved a few feet away, giving them space, his back half turned, close enough to be present, far enough to be decent. Grace crouched beside Eli again. The concrete was cold through her sneakers. Quote 113. She kept her voice steady. Quote 1114. He looked up. His eyes were careful, but underneath the carefulness, hope. Raw and quiet, and trying not to show itself too much. Quote 151. He said. It wasn't a question. It was something he needed to say out loud. I think she will, Grace said. He nodded once. Then he reached into the collar of his jacket and folded it back, showing her the inside, the permanent marker, the neat, deliberate letters, slightly faded but clear. A name, a phone number. She wrote it there herself, Eli said. She said if I was ever lost, someone good would find it. Grace read the name, Nora James, and a number with a 404 area code. Her throat tightened. She pressed the number into her phone. It rang once, twice. The third ring cut short. Hello? The voice was a woman's, alert, immediate, like someone who had been waiting by the phone for days. Grace said. The voice was immediate, taut as a wire. She kept her voice level. A sound came through the phone, not a word, just a sound, the kind that lives below language. Then, __quote, _125, __. Grace held the phone out to Eli. He took it with both hands, pressed it against his ear. And for the first time since Grace had found him, his face changed completely, every careful, calculated layer of it falling away at once, like something that had been held rigid for 4 days, finally letting go. __, quote _126, __. His voice cracked on the second syllable. Grace stood up and turned slightly away. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. Behind her, she heard Marcus shift his weight. She didn't look at him. Eli spoke quietly into the phone for 2 minutes. Grace didn't hear all of it. She wasn't trying to. She heard, I know. She heard, I kept the paper in my shoe the whole time. She heard, very softly, I wasn't scared. Atlas stayed with me. When he handed the phone back, his eyes were wet, but his chin was steady. She's coming, he said. I know, Grace said. Then Atlas moved. He stood, turned his head toward the main concourse entrance. His ears came forward, both of them, the torn one and the whole one, and a low sound moved through his chest. Not a growl, something else. Recognition. Grace looked up. A transit supervisor was crossing the concourse with 2 other officers, moving with the kind of purpose that meant someone had made a call Grace hadn't authorized. Behind them, a woman in a gray blazer, clipboard, lanyard, the particular expression of someone arriving to manage a situation. Marcus stepped forward. He put himself, quietly and deliberately, between the approaching group and the bench. __, quote, _132, __. The supervisor's voice carried across the tile. We've had a report about an unaccompanied minor. I'm aware, Marcus said. I've been with him. The placement contact is requesting. The placement contact, Marcus said, can wait. He said it without raising his voice. Just said it. Final. The supervisor stopped. The woman with the clipboard stopped. Grace felt something release in her chest. The supervisor looked at Eli, at Atlas, at Grace. Is the child all right? He asked. And this time, it wasn't procedure. It was a real question, Marcus said. Grace crouched beside Eli one more time. She held his gaze. Eli looked at her, then at Atlas. He put his hand on the dog's back, the same way he had in the dark of the station the night before, when Atlas had simply appeared and lain beside him without being asked. Okay, he said. Atlas sat down next to him, pressed his whole side against the boy's leg, and didn't move. Nora arrived 4 hours and 11 minutes later. She came through the main entrance of the station with the particular walk of someone moving as fast as dignity allows, not running, but close. Her coat was buttoned wrong, one button off all the way down, and she hadn't noticed or hadn't cared. She was 67 years old, with gray at her temples and hands that had clearly spent decades doing useful things. She stopped when she saw Eli. Just stopped. Her hand came up and covered her mouth. Her eyes went bright and still. Eli stood up from the bench. He crossed the distance between them at a dead run. She caught him with both arms and held on, her chin dropping to the top of his head, her eyes closing. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Neither did he. The station moved around them. Announcements, pigeons, the kiosk coffee smell, and none of it touched them. Then Nora looked up. She found Grace across the space between them. __, quote _ 144 __. She said, "Just that." Grace nodded. Her throat was too full for words. Calls were made that evening. Questions were asked about the placement house, the right questions by the right people. The family advocate Deb had contacted was thorough and unhurried and very good at her job. The process that followed was not fast, but it moved. Within the week, Nora had begun the final steps toward permanent custody. Paperwork she had been fighting for 2 years, now suddenly unstuck, moving forward with the quiet momentum of something whose time had finally come. 3 weeks later, Grace drove to Nora's apartment with Atlas in the back seat. Eli opened the door before she knocked. He dropped straight to his knees on the welcome mat and wrapped both arms around the dog's neck, his face buried in the brindle fur. Atlas stood perfectly still and let him. __, quote _ 145 __, Grace said. Eli looked up, grinning. A real grin, unguarded, the face of a child who has remembered how to be one. Inside, the apartment smelled of something warm and savory, the kind of smell that means someone cooked a real meal and set the table properly. Nora moved between the kitchen and the dining room with easy authority, and Grace sat at a table with a cloth on it and felt something loosen in her chest that she hadn't realized was tight. She fought for 2 years, Grace told Deb on the phone that night, driving home. Atlas was asleep in the back seat, one paw draped over the edge of the seat. 2 years of paperwork and waiting, and it took a dog and a bus station bench to finally move it forward. She looked at Atlas in the rearview mirror, made a decision, quietly, without drama. He was already home. Later, Eli asked her, "Do you think he knew? When he found me, do you think he knew he was helping?" Grace glanced at Atlas, already asleep, his breathing slow and even. "I think," she said, "he just knew you needed someone to stay." Eli was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's all I needed." Some children find ways to ask for help that adults almost miss. Some animals sense what people walk past, and some ordinary people, underpaid, unnoticed, just doing their Tuesday, choose to stop. That choice is everything. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. We share stories like this every week because some truths are best told slowly, and some heroes have